relatively quickly, because much of it is really just reporting back on some of these things. So,
Okay.
as far as the Oak Ridge curb stop, I think we should anticipate that it's going to cost us, cost the town or cost us around $5,000 to install that curb stop. I still want to try to get Corey Brundage to bid on some of these, because for example, the curb stop that was recently installed on Witts Lane to service Masonic Lane, not the main itself, but just the curb stop there on Witts Lane, that Robert V. Auer charged us $5,000 for that. So I think we could do better if we have Corey Brundage, bidding as well on some of these. I know that the folks who bought the property on Squires Pond Lane intend to use him for the installation of the curb stop on Main Street and to bring the 2-inch water main down to service that property. We don't have anybody else who's expressed interest yet. I did reach out to Richard Robichaux, but they have not gotten back to me on that. The other potential property that's on there is owned by the Methodist Church, and I have not spoken to them yet on this. So Oak Ridge, we should assume that it's going to cost us, around $5,000 to install that. And the next thing is on the SCADA system. We received one invoice from Butch Nealon for $40,000. He still has some work left to do at the Coles Neck well site. I believe the expectation is that there may be another 20% or so, 20 to 25% that we would have to spend on that. So because of that, I've held off on submitting the invoice or invoices to the Housing Choice Program for that. We should have that hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and then we can submit the entire amount. With that, that said, that would, I think, put us in the range of somewhere around 65 to 68,000 on the house from the Housing Choice Grant, having spent that much. The balance of which would be available for engineering services for the water main. I tried, and speaking of which, on the water main installation, we did get 2 invoices from environmental partners on that. To date, they have invoiced about 66,000 for January and February. I expect that we will see another probably 40 to 50,000 for March, all of which could be billed to Mass Works, or at least that amount that is not covered under the Housing Choice Program. And we are due to submit a report for the Mass Works program for this quarter, for January through the end of March. I tried to go in to do that this past week, and I am not able to go into the program to do that. I did talk with Nick Buwens at the Mass Works program earlier today on that, and he said not to worry. As soon as we have the new assistant town administrator in place, that we'll have a phone conversation and he can walk her through that as to how to submit the invoices and the quarterly report. So that's essentially where we're at with that. According to Paul Millette, we are approximately, we've done about, or at least this was at the end of February, we had roughly 45% of the survey and initial planning work done on the engineering, and another 20% on the design. We anticipate it'll be obviously much higher now that they're, have gone through essentially the month of March. So we're on target to have the engineering services completed by the end of April. So that we're able to go out to bid in May. And that's what they're intending to do. Any questions on that?
That's great, Jim. That's really incredible progress.
Yeah, no, they've done a great job. I mean, they've done a lot of as I said, they've done a lot of the survey work. I think that they're doing some of the survey work up on Old Hay Road in that area now.
So if they get out to bid, and let's just say they do get out to bid in May, would it be a couple of, I would imagine, a month before we start to see some bids coming back?
I think that their plan was they were hoping that they could get the bids in by July. Obviously, this is different than, say, like having to develop plans for the housing project or whatever. This one is essentially just putting numbers to the plan that's been developed by environmental partners. So I don't think that they'll leave it for more than a couple of months. That's what I believe.
Theoretically, they could start construction maybe like in September.
That's the plan, was that it would be out in September or early October.
That's fantastic. Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So that's where we're at with that. The new assistant town administrator who will take this on, Rebecca, tell me, it's not Finch. What is it?
No, it's Rebecca Slick. Like Slick. Yep.
Okay.
And she's going to start Thursday. But I'm going to set up a Zoom meeting with you guys as soon as she won't physically be in the office, because if you saw her office right now, it's in complete shambles because they're repainting the walls or something. So, and she's still in, no, I don't remember where she is. She's in Berkshire County. That's where she lives. So she's currently looking for housing down here. So, but it's not going to be in Wellfleet. I told her to try Truro, Eastham, Orleans, Brewster, and Harwich. So hopefully she'll get something.
So if we need to, we could get a packet of information off to her regarding these two programs, the housing
Absolutely.
and the Mass Works.
Yep, absolutely. And she's really, I mean, she has a great amount of experience with doing RFPs and doing grant applications.
Okay. What I would recommend, then, I'm going to bring the folders back to the office either tomorrow or Thursday, the ones that I was using here, and I will, and then we can maybe photocopy some of that and send it off to her, so she has that she can review.
Yeah, I can scan it actually and send it to her electronically.
That'd be great. That'd be
perfect.
Yeah. Okay. All right. On to that. If there's nothing more on that, we can move on to the budget recommendations. So we still do not have a draft of the 22 budget. I had asked Heather, for something, and she assured me that she would try to get that, although they were in the midst of the finalizing the audit. And I guess there's been some issues with that. So I don't know if that's impacted on the budgeting process for 22 or not, but I have a feeling that that is the case. At least
So I
that's
can
what-
give you a little detail on that.
Yeah,
I'm trying to put together notebooks for the select board because they are having a meeting April 5th on all of the budgets. So today she said she should be able to generate most of them by tomorrow. And yep, I think she just it's in a new format, but she should be able to generate all of the budgets for me for tomorrow.
okay.
And if I get Beach, I'll just send it to all of you so that at least you can look at it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I won't be available on that day. For the, Kurt, will you be back next week?
No, I'm actually not back until the 10th.
Okay.
And they may not get to your budget. I mean, they're going through every single one. So they're on there. So if they do get to it, they can talk about it. But I don't think they're going to get through all of them. And they're going to do the big budgets first, obviously.
Well, I'll be back in the office. I'll be back here in Wellfleet as of a week from Friday. So the following week, if they meet the following week, I could participate in that
Yep,
call.
they meet on the 13th. So again, so they meet on the 13th and then the 27th.
Okay.
The 5th is just so they can get rolling on the budgets, but I can ask them to postpone it if you want. That way you can at least be at the 13th meeting.
Okay. Kurt, do you know whether or not you have to participate for wastewater?
Rebecca and I have actually the Board of Selectmen did want to meet with us, and I'm not sure when, and I'm not sure if they want to do a joint with the Finance Committee. So they actually wanted to do a separate wastewater meeting outside of the normal Board of Selectmen meeting. I think mainly because it's going to be, fairly complicated. I mean, you were on the call yesterday, Jim.
Yeah, very complicated.
And getting through that material inside a regular Board of Selectmen meeting really wouldn't make much sense. So,
Right.
anyway, that's what their request was, and I guess Rebecca's working on trying to figure out a time.
Yeah. Well,
That's true. And if that's the case, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know that you want to do it together. And the funny part is I can say this, is the FinCom and the Select Board have never really met together. They usually have two members of the FinCom at a Select Board meeting, and they can answer any questions if needed. So that may end up happening all over again. We'll see where that goes with them.
Yeah.
But Kurt's right. We're going to try and figure out, once they get through the budget stuff, I think they're going to want to set up a meeting for wastewater.
Yeah. Well, the two things that were of concern in our budget, I assume that what we're going to get from Heather on this is pretty much a kind of the budget recast from last year. Although when in talking with Maria last week, I think she intimated that she was looking for areas where they could cut in all the budgets, all the department budgets. So I don't know if that's going to happen for us, but I think we should anticipate that there won't be an opportunity for any significant increase. So, I mean, I know we had talked about wanting to see an increase in the contingency portion, the line item for Whitewater. But I would expect that that's probably not going to be possible, that we'll be asked to hold it to the 25,000 that's we've had over the last several years. And because the other item that we had talked about with this had to do with the installation of the new water meters. And Maria had suggested that she wants to see that put into a warrant article for town meeting, rather than into operations. That's something that we need to talk about in terms of the warrant article for that.
Yeah, but isn't it a little complicated for a warrant article? I mean, if you do really appreciate the background, I think, you would just say, oh, I don't want to spend the money.
I think that I don't know that we have a choice on that,
Oh, really?
in terms of whether we can't, what are we going to do? We have to to replace these meters. So the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be done. Yeah.
So I think what she is suggesting, if it goes in as a warrant article, it'd be a capital item, and we do the request the full amount.
Jim,
This will be in September, the meeting?
No, the meeting's in June.
In June. Oh, okay.
Jim, is this something that we could, is potentially eligible for Mass Works?
Well, I think the expectation on the Mass Works is that we're still going to need a private share, because we had requested the 3.8 million, and if you look at the contract documents, they reflect that the balance, or roughly 1.3 million, would be coming from other sources. So even if the whole project, including the meters, comes in at 3.8 million, there still wouldn't be enough funds from Mass Works to cover that.
Right, but we have an authorization. Well, I guess what I was thinking is the existing authorization, less grant funds. There's more borrowing capacity under the currently approved borrowing authorization.
Yeah. Well, I think your point is well taken, that we could consider, since it's a capital item associated with the water system, whether or not we could, if we are authorized to borrow up to 3.8 million, anything in excess of the 2.5 million from Mass Works, could that be applied from applied against the borrowing, that including the cost of the meters, installation of the meters.
Yeah, I think it really would boil down to whether the original language is broad enough to include that. But if so, then we wouldn't have to do anything. We basically have the capacity to borrow it already, and we're not going to exceed the borrowing capacity.
We wouldn't have to have a warrant article.
Correct. As long as the language in the original article is sufficient to cover something like meters, which I would think it would. We need meters for Briar Lane. There might be enough wiggle room in there to include, so that it falls within the borrowing language already authorized. And we're not going to use that full borrowing capacity, so we wouldn't have to ask for anything else.
Right. Rebecca, did you find a copy of that article from last year's town meeting?
I do have a copy. Yep.
Yeah.
I was actually looking at it yesterday. You want me to send it to you?
Yeah, send it around.
Okay.
As I recall, I think it was pretty specific about the installation of the water main, but I may be mistaken.
And, worst case scenario, Jim, we could ask the Board of Selectmen to ask Town Council, because they've got a new procedure, but, we could ask the Board of Selectmen to ask Town Council if they would review whether the meters, if it's not clear enough, could they review the language of that article as to whether, this additional capital amount for meters is covered under that authorization.
Right. All right, well, Rebecca, if you would send it around, that would be great.
Yep, I'm doing that right now.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I would think that if it's going to be a warrant article, we better make a very strong case for the fact that there's really no choice. Because,
Right.
you know, if you have a warrant, there's always a possibility that it could not pass. And that would just foul everything up.
Well, we also have a really strong argument. I agree with you, Catherine, but we also have a really strong argument to say, you know, we had I think it was 3.6 authorized, 2.4 grant. So, you know, the language wasn't sufficient in the original article to cover the meters. You know, we're only going to be using, 1.2 of the 3.6 borrowing, and we need to reauthorize through a different article the money to be able to cover the meters. You know, in essence, we make the argument that we've just saved the town 2.4 million through the grant, but we still need these meters.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I want to look at the Mass Works grant as well for the potential that where there may be a way to request additional funding through them if the project cost exceeds you know, what the grant that we have.
I mean, I know this is a little bit of a fuzzy line, Jim, but we need meters for Briar Lane.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
So we need meters regardless.
Yeah.
We have to get new meters as part of the original project.
Right. Yeah. All right. So how do we proceed on this then now?
Well, I think the easiest thing is to ask the Board of Selectmen if they would confer with Town Council regarding acquiring meters through the existing borrowing authorization.
Right.
That's the easiest thing to do, because then we don't have to do a warrant article. You know, we can still go back to Mass Works and say, you know, gee, by the way, is there anything else that we might be able to apply for this other piece that for whatever reason wasn't included in the initial grant application?
Well, I mean, that's the other thing with it, Kurt, that we could reach out to them and ask them if we can use any of the existing 2.5 million grant for installation of the meters.
Oh, yeah. That's the same effect. You're right. Yep, you're exactly right, because that, reduces the amount that is available from Mass Works for the actual laying of pipes, but that's covered under the warrant article.
Right.
So yeah, either way will work.
Yeah. So that, I think this is probably something that we need to kind of review with Maria before this is brought up to the select board.
that sounds like a prudent thing to do.
Yeah.
Let's see if I'd like to try to get to her before the end of this week. Tell her what we were thinking about with this.
Mm-hmm.
See what she says, and to say that way we could have the discussion with our rep at Mass Works, Nick Bulens, about the potential for expanding the scope to include the meters. So if that's okay with everybody, I will reach out to Maria about that this week.
Okay.
Sounds great.
All right. Good. So the other piece on this, so the budget, the actual operating budget, I think, as I said, the only change that I think that You know, I mean, we can push to see if we can get more than the 25,000. I mean, 2,500, sorry, for the contingency fund. But I don't think that we're going to have much success. I mean, Rebecca, you may have heard more from her since I was there last week.
I know that there were changes made. I don't know what the changes were. And it wasn't just your budget, it was to all the budgets because I think they were over quite a bit. So they were trying to kind of weed through it, but I don't know the exact number.
I heard her say that the shortfall was somewhere around 650,000.
I think that's a correct number. Yep.
Yeah.
But I don't know for certain. So.
Yeah. And the other point that she made with respect to the budget or the reserve fund in the budget was that she said that normally if those funds had been raised through the enterprise fund, through the water enterprise fund, they would indeed be should remain available to the enterprise fund for subsequent years' budgets. However, in this case, since there is has been a substantial contribution from the town to offset the deficits in our budget, that she's not certain that we would be able to claim any money that was unspent in prior years, if it in fact was part of the deficit funding that was provided for by the town.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jim. I mean, I think it's worth a discussion with her further because, and maybe even with Heather, because Heather seems pretty sharp on these.
Yeah, well, Heather was the one that said no. She said those funds should remain yours, but that was before I think she was aware that that was the town's contribution was quite substantial.
Right, but I don't think the town can take it back. In other words, it's really, I think, a legal question as to, for example, when the town meeting authorizes a certain transfer to the enterprise fund, which is an amount that's agreed upon, it's in the enterprise fund.
Right.
So the town reaching back into the enterprise fund to take money back seems a little bit, that may not be legal.
Yeah. Well, I think that
so it's just a question. Yeah, it's just a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so it needs to be discussed further.
So we could be in better shape than we thought, actually.
Could be. Yeah. So, anything more on the budget?
Well, just a sidebar. I don't know when, but I would be interested to kind of get some of your reaction, probably under other business on our agenda, but your reaction to the discussions around wastewater, because clearly, we're talking about coming in for roughly a $6.4 million capital borrowing article, and something around 450,000 or thereabouts for a regular budget item, which, given that we've got a $650,000 shortfall, I guess that's going to need to be a Prop 2.5 override question. But clearly that I don't want to take up time at this part of the meeting, but just as additional perspective on how much pressure there is on the town budget.
Right. So, why don't we hold that until toward the end of the meeting then? Because then maybe then you can just give us a report on what happened in that meeting yesterday.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect.
All right. So the next item that's on here is an issue that came up with the Wellfleet Theater. apparently, from what I understand, they reached out to the folks who own the theater, reached out to the town of Eastham about wanting to connect to the water system, the Eastham's water system. And Eastham is considering it only from the standpoint that sorry about that. That they need a quote a large customer at the end of the system, and they were hoping if they could connect the theater, that would solve their issue around not having to dump water at at that end of their system. They wanted to know what our feeling or our thoughts were on this, and I said, we really don't, it's not something that we'd even considered at this point, and it's really they need to decide what they're willing to offer, and then they would have to negotiate with those folks, I think. But I think that Jackie Beebe did want to know what the position of the water commissioners would be if they were able to come up with some sort of agreement with them, with the understanding that if we ever extended our water system down that far, that they would then, we would be able to take that property back onto our system. So that's it. It's really just in an early discussion stage at this point.
Jim, I mean, philosophically, I don't think there's, I don't know where Eastham would come up with the money, but to extend their water main from essentially the Eastham town line all the way to the Watt Theater, compared
Not
with
Watt.
No, what's the cinema?
I meant the cinema, the drive-in.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I don't think we'd ever take it back, really.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be many a
No.
long year before we ever get water that far south.
Yeah, well, apparently they had such an arrangement with the town of Orleans as well before they had, before their system was in place. They did have some properties there over the line in
Okay.
that were on the Orleans system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
And it even makes sense. It almost makes sense, Jim, for example, for Eastham to supply, Lieutenant Island, rather than us running, because we don't have any density between, you know what I mean? We lose density at about Drummer Cove.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I think what it does is it opens up the potential for discussion around the expansion of their system and how that could benefit both towns. So I think it's still going to be a very expensive proposition to do this because they're talking about just installing a curb stop out at Route 6, near the town line, and then leaving the rest of it all up to the property owner to install whatever is needed from the property line down to their concession area at the drive-in theater and to any of the other buildings that they may wish to include on it. So,
Jim, do you know why they need water? In other words, what's the problem? What's the problem?
I don't know, and I'm not sure that. I'm not sure how to handle that. If we want to get involved in a discussion with them, or.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because if there's a septic issue there, well, two things. If there's a septic issue, it'd be worth knowing. With these advanced IA systems that we're looking at, there may be a leach field issue that's driving an offset from their water supply, or they might have nitrogen contamination or something like that. It could also be salt. I mean, if we understand a little bit about the problem, there might be other things to be able to offer. It looks like, well, and the other thing is that there may be an opportunity to do some trading with Eastham. Eastham does have a responsibility of about 2%, 2.5% to the town of Wellfleet with regard to cleaning up Wellfleet Harbor. In other words, their nitrogen contribution is about 2.5% of the load that goes into the harbor. So they do need to make a financial contribution, and they have signed a letter of cooperation with us, with the town of Wellfleet already. So there's ways that we might be able to do this without it costing the town a lot.
Right. Well, I don't know, does anyone know the owners of that property now?
I believe, although I'm not sure, Ben Zender is one of the partners, and I know Ben pretty well, so I can reach out to him.
Okay.
And I actually do have the owner's number too, now that I think about it.
Well, I know that according to the discussions I had with Jackie Beebe, they have 5 wells on that property.
They have 3 well fields on the theater complex.
Do you know anything about the quality of the water, Neil?
I have a feeling there's a nitrate issue on one of the well fields.
Okay. And I don't recall, I haven't, it's been so long since I've been in that theater in the inside there, if they have a fire suppression system in there.
Yeah, they do.
That's something that would have to be, either they'd have to retain the wells for that purpose. Do they have a storage tank for that, or?
Yeah, they have several tanks. The biggest one is on the well field that is closest to the theater. The other well fields have smaller tanks, several of them.
Right. And have you serviced that?
Yeah, I haven't serviced them recently, but I did do some service work and some well installations some years ago.
Okay. Well, Kurt, you're going to reach out to them?
Yeah, I can do that, Jim.
All right. So there really isn't, I don't think that it's, as I said, it's very preliminary at this point. But Jackie did point out that the information did get out to the independent newspaper as a result of that being discussed at one of their select board meetings. So there may be some questions that come up as a result of that. Anyways, so that's what that issue is about. We already talked about the Mass Works third quarter reports. That will be something that Rebecca will be managing when she arrives here. Actually, I intended to pull the RFP when I go over to the office, and I still don't have addresses on that. The only one that we have is Ty and Bond. And I know that you had mentioned, Kurt, that may be something that we may be able to ask Scott Horsley whether or not they would be interested in working with us on the financial consulting.
Yes. I have not done. Horsley Witten should be a bidder that should be on the list. What I'll do is, I'll just text Scott right now and make sure he's on top of that.
Okay. And I'll have to pull that file out from the office, Rebecca, so we can get that out.
Okay.
So I had one other item on here that I wanted to mention before I turn this over to Kurt, and that's it. Eric Smith suggested that the contract with Whitewater may be expiring as of July. I'm not certain of that. I thought it had already been renewed, but it may have been as long as 3 years ago. I'm not sure that we can do another contract extension, or if it has to go out to bid. So we'll take a look at that. That contract should be in the office, Rebecca.
Yeah, I have it in a file.
Okay. I would prefer, since we're dealing with the issue of the water meters, that if we were able just to do a contract extension, would make it much simpler for us at this point.
There's probably, I don't actually know the answer to the question, but there's probably a threshold under which we have to go back out to bid. But I think if the contract terms are, not substantially different, I'm not sure who can. I'm just not sure who any. Who would know is Harry. Harry would know the answer to that question. What the trigger is. What's that?
Pull that file.
The new assistant TA may know as well if she's if she's already a certified contracting officer in Massachusetts, but certainly Harry would know.
Yeah.
She is.
All right.
And then I can tell you that your new water clerk starts on Thursday.
And who is that?
Her name is Karen Plantier.
Spell that last name?
Plantier.
Okay.
And she is one of two candidates that we interviewed. And she lives in Orleans, correct?
Yes. She's lovely. I think she'll do a good job.
Good.
You're just saying that. You're just happy.
No, what's really funny is that I really wanted to just keep all of it, but it's a lot of work. So I rethought that because I got inundated with select board stuff and realizing that I couldn't manage all 5 jobs.
Yeah.
You have an awfully big scope right now, Rebecca.
I do. Thank you. Yes, I do. I enjoy it, but it definitely keeps me on my toes.
Yeah.
And I'll train her and help in any way that I can. So if something that she's not able to do, I'm right across the hall. You can come ask me.
Yeah, she seemed pretty unflappable when we had the call with her. Like, she would dig in and do whatever she needed to do to learn stuff.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I liked about her most.
Yeah.
But again, I have no problem helping out in any way that I can.
Yeah. All right, that's all I have on the agenda. So Kurt, do you want to walk us through what happened with the wastewater? Because I think it has an impact as well on us, on the water system.
Yeah. So I will do at our next meeting. What I can do is I can do more of a full-blown presentation. I think we've got the presentation to a point where we've got consensus on the numbers and the strategy and all that stuff relative to what's happening with the overall wastewater plan. Our biggest challenge has been trying to come up with what a financing plan looks like over the next 25 years that would be consistent with meeting our nitrogen reduction numbers. So we basically have to get rid of 20,000 kilograms of nitrogen a year, and we got to figure out how to do that. So what Scott's been working on is a series of 5-year increments of a variety of different options that include, all of these alternative things like, enhanced innovative alternative septic systems, which, you add a little black box and you reduce nitrogen about 95% from a septic system. So you can use traditional Title V with a very low cost addition and get about a 90 to 95% reduction in nitrogen. And then when you look at the build out in the town, the number of new, bedrooms or new additions or new construction units, there's about 60 to 65 a year. When you project it all out, it's probably about 70 to 80% of the nitrogen removal requirements that the town has. When you couple that with, something like permeably reactive barriers, the salt marsh restoration projects, both Mayo Creek and then one at Howes Pond, and you couple it with some expanded oyster restoration and the Lawrence Road project, 95 Lawrence Road project. When you put this all together, you can actually get a scenario where you can reach those reduction requirements. And it turns out that pursuing the strategy that way will cost the town about somewhere between 20 and 40 million or so over the next 25 years. The alternative to that is to build a sewer system, and the sewer system turns out to reach the same level of nitrogen reduction would cost the town about 190 million. So there's a very big difference between doing it through a set of alternatives versus building a sewer system. So the long and short, there's also an intermediate strategy where if we did some sewering in downtown, if it was required for either economic development purposes or, if there was some other driving reasons to want to do that, we do have numbers for what that would cost. And it's, it'd be about another, 20, 30, $40 million to do sewering for downtown. So what we're going to recommend to town meeting, what the wastewater committee did recommend to the Board of Selectmen and to the Finance Committee is to undertake a largely alternative strategy and ask for an authorization of about 6.4 million for a capital borrowing authorization that would cover this first 5 years of a heavily alternative strategy. And if town meeting approves that, probably 25 to 75% of it would be eligible for about 6 or 7 different grant opportunities, as well as the Cape Cod Water Protection Fund. So there's a whole bunch of places where we can immediately go. Mass Works, there's housing trust grants. There's just a whole host of other grant channels that we think we can get 25 to 75% of that, 6.4 million from those grant sources. So sort of like what we did with the water system, or with the dredging project, get an authorization from the town, which then allows us to tell DEP that the town has a funding commitment in place for this, which lets DEP sign a watershed permit with the town, and then allows us to go after these grant sources to try to pull in as many as we can. In addition to that, we have the wastewater committee approved requesting and asking the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee and ultimately the town requesting $450,000 annually, which would go toward operations and maintenance. A chunk of that is for basically running the wastewater treatment facility for 95 Lawrence Road. The town is, would be kicking in as a partner on that project about 2/3 of the capital and operating and maintenance costs. 95 Lawrence Road, we'd be kicking in about 1/3, and those numbers were based on the consulting report that the Cape Cod Commission funded to look at different alternatives for wastewater. The net of all of that is that the housing project plus doing the school, fire, and police stations and connecting them together means that we have a net reduction of nitrogen in that watershed, even with the addition of the housing project. So it's really just Scott, Scott's fond of calling it one of the coolest things that he's seen in a long time, in terms of being able to do an affordable housing development and then do it in a way that you're actually reducing nitrogen in the watershed. And that comes because of connecting those other loads, and the amount of nitrogen that you're able to reduce from those actually exceeds the amount that would be added from the housing project. So, but we need to, the town for its part needs to then, operate what it would have to do and invest in the, the pipes and the connections that it would need to undertake, as part of this project. So there's also things like a wastewater water position. We've got that in as part of the operations and maintenance package. So that would add staff to help both the water system and the wastewater in terms of going after, doing our master planning, and then from the wastewater side, dealing with the myriad of project management related performance monitoring and reporting issues, and dealing with DEP that are required as part of this wastewater plan. We also, as part of the O&M plan, are recommending that we have a grant writer, because the amount of money that we're talking about is so significant. It's maybe the new assistant town administrator could undertake some of this, but given the number of sources that we've identified and given the amounts of money that we're talking about, I just don't know what their time commitment would be in terms of committing to this, because it's pretty much a 5-year, this is something that's going to be going on for a while. So that in a nutshell is kind of what's in there. And that's what the wastewater committee did approve. The last thing that they approved was a new recommendation to the Board of Health to adopt a new regulation that would require these new enhanced IA systems in the town of Wellfleet, and provide a roughly $12,500 subsidy or grant for somebody who actually installs one of these, at least for the time being, certainly during the 5-year period, because we need to stimulate the market. These new enhanced IA systems aren't yet what's called generally approved. So in other words, if you put one in, DEP is allowing them to go in, but they haven't said, yes, this is the new replacement for Title V yet. They need about 60 systems installed. I think there's like 25 currently installed in Massachusetts. They need about 50 or 60, and they need the data from those systems to certify them, to ultimately approve them for general use. They do expect that in the next couple of years. It's not something that they're expecting that won't happen, but certainly to a homeowner, there is some risk that if it didn't happen, they would want to have a fallback, or at least not be hit with the 12.5, that the additional cost for doing this black box that removes nitrogen from a Title V system. So they'd still have a standard Title V system that meets DEP requirements, and they wouldn't be out the cost of having done something that DEP ultimately doesn't approve. So that in a nutshell isn't, I think, I don't know, did I miss anything, Jim?
No, but it raises a couple of questions for me. How is this technology different than, say, just a standard Title V?
So what it is it's a box into which wood chips are placed. There's pumping and aeration of that box. So what happens is from your current Title V system, so when waste comes out of your house, it goes into a settling tank, and the settling tank lets solids drop out, and then the water, the gray water, goes out of that settling tank into your leach field. So what this would do is put a box in between, so the gray water comes into this wood chip system, and through anaerobic digestion and through populating this system with anaerobic bacteria, they consume the nutrients, the nitrogen in that water stream. They also convert other contaminants of emerging concern. So there's a biological operation that happens in the system that substantially removes all the nitrogen, and also actually does a great job of converting and breaking down, your cleansers, your antibiotics, these kinds of chemicals that go into our household wastewater streams that they call contaminants of emerging concern. And from that black box, the gray water then goes into your leach field. And the black box also would let you reduce the leach field size by about 50%. So for places that are currently constrained from a lot line setback, or a foundation setback, or a well setback, this could be a real big advantage for folks who are constrained otherwise with property development. It also would let a homeowner who chooses this to add either an extra bedroom or an affordable accessory dwelling unit. Currently, if you choose to put what's called an innovative alternative, or I'm sorry, an innovative septic system, right now there is right now what's on our books is, if you do this innovative system, it would allow you to do an extra bedroom. It's about twice as expensive as a Title V system, but it currently lets you do an extra bedroom. When you go to what we call the enhanced IA, this wood chip black box version of it, it does a much better job. It's way less expensive, and you'd still get the extra bedroom. So those are some of the other benefits. But to your basic question, Jim, it's a black box in between that then does this extra removal process before the water goes to the leach field.
Okay. But that could be used then on other properties around town to reduce the nitrogen load coming into watershed and or anywhere in town, in fact.
Exactly. It's a beautiful thing because any current septic system can be retrofitted with this. The idea here is that rather than go about retrofitting sort of arbitrarily, to us what made the most sense is if somebody's got a failed septic system, or they're going to do new construction or add a bedroom, they're going to have to make modifications to their existing septic systems. They're already going to be digging and doing stuff. That's the perfect time to go in and just add this black box, and the incremental cost becomes very, very low to get this tremendous improvement in the overall functioning of the system.
Right. Good. All right. Well, I think we're going to be hearing more about that going forward. It's obviously something that's going to come up at town meeting, so I think we want to get behind this. The water board does. So anything else?
I was just curious if people had any questions, or certainly, especially as it relates to the water board's operations. I think it's a big plus, because we'll if this O&M component, which would be a Prop 2.5 override, if that's approved, we'll have staff finally.
That was
and I think
I was glad to hear that there's possibility for staffing. Yeah.
So we're kind of tucking it into the wastewater request. It's what we've talked about all along, and I think in discussions with town administration, that's been the intent all along, and we've budgeted that component at about $200,000 a year. So it certainly covers the staff person, and it would cover a grant writer, and it would cover, and the grant writer, by the way, the grant writer could write water system grants too. So it's trying to get the capacity that we need to deal with water and wastewater issues.
Right. Good. All right. Any other announcements or items that we want to talk about?
Next meeting.
Right, next meeting, right. So, 2 weeks out would put us at, Tuesday, the,
13th.
right,
You're getting back that day, aren't you, or something?
Well,
Yeah.
that's the select board meeting. So if you
Right.
wanted to be on that, I don't know that you'd want to do, I mean, you can go back to the 4 o'clock and that's fine.
I think we
I'm kind-
should.
You're going to say what I was going to say,
Kurt,
but
Kurt, you won't be
yeah.
back until,
The 16th, you said, didn't you?
No, I'm back the 10th. So I would, if we wanted to do a 4
10th,
o'clock
okay.
meeting, yeah, if we want to do a 4 o'clock meeting on the 13th, I think that makes a lot of sense. We may very well need to talk about some things that we'd want to talk to the Board of Selectmen with later.
right. So why don't we plan on that, the 13th? At 4.
On the 13th, that's 4, huh? Okay.
Rebecca, are you in the office tomorrow?
I am. I'm not there until afternoon because I have a doctor's appointment at 11. But believe it or not, the ATA's office is open because it's in shambles. But I don't think he's touched any of the files.
Well, I know when I was there the other day, it was very tough to get into the files because the furniture was all moved around.
It still is.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, well, but you'll be there in the afternoon anyway, so.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So if you want to come in the afternoon, we can rummage through.
Yeah.
And he might be done, so we'll see.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
That's a motion to adjourn, I think.
Yeah, so move.
Second.
Okay.
Aye. Right.
Aye. Neil?
Aye.
Aye.
And Kurt, you're aye?
Aye.
And I agree. Aye.
Okay.
How about Gail? Does Gail agree?
Yes, Gail agrees.
Okay, good.
We have to deal with the Gale issue at some point in depth.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank
All
you
right,
very
I
much.
sent you the warrant article, so you should have it in your email now.
Okay.
Let me know if you
Yeah,
have any
it's in.
questions.
I saw it already.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.